Hi there, welcome to GiveThx. This is our mini webinar series and we are in webinar 3. We're going to be talking about inclusivity. I'll give you a couple more seconds to respond to the poll here before I close it. Today we're going to focus on how we can support social emotional learning to support our inclusivity of students. And next week we'll talk about staff. I'm Dr. Amy Alomar. I'm the director of the schools program here, and I just want to let you know that we will be sharing all of the resources at the end of the webinar, and then also we will email them to you in a follow-up email. You can feel welcome to submit question and answer or questions to our Q&A and also use the chat, and I'll remain at the end for any questions. I want to acknowledge that we have a guest panelist with us today, Donovan Hall. Welcome. He'll be talking to us later on and sharing the educator voice with us about inclusion using GiveThx. We want to welcome you in general, but also we want to focus today on responsible decision making. We're going to be looking at the SEL competence from CASEL on responsible decision making. We want you to be able to look at some gratitude science and then think about how are you going to apply that to your practice in your classroom, or otherwise I saw we have some counselors with us as well today. I'd love to start by having you share via chat, and this can be to me personally, or you can share it publicly. But when is a time that you have felt included, maybe in a team, a project, a family? Who helped you feel included, and what would you say to them, or what have you said to them? And I just want you to think on that for a moment and share it with us. And it looks like we're starting to get some responses in the chat here. It looks like some of you are saying in college, it was hard to start. And so your roommate was somebody that helped you feel included. That's fantastic. Oh, wonderful. Your administrator is doing a good job of making you feel included during distance learning through office hours. That's great. It looks like a couple other of you are writing in there now. Oh, you love the virtual pub trivia night that your faculty is doing regularly. That's fantastic, super fun. And let's see if we can get a couple more in here. As a coach and lead teacher, you found the people that you work with are always looking for a team response. Fantastic. Your rugby team in college. Wow, way to go playing rugby. I love it. All shapes, sizes, and genders are welcome. Maybe not me, but otherwise. Not sure if I'm cut out for that. Thank you guys so much for sharing. Really appreciate that. You can continue to share in the chat, and we always love to hear from you. I encourage you to be joining in along in the conversation. So today we'll focus specifically on the CASEL competency of responsible decision making. And really we want to think about that and how our choices and our students' choices help to promote inclusivity, specifically through these sub-competencies, the identifying problems, analyzing situations, and such. We want you to really think about, you know, we can offer our students choice, and how do they use those choices to interact, and how do they use it to include, and how do they recognize who they are in a situation to be included and make those choices. So we want to focus on that today. Gratitude in general, we know is we can be grateful for things, but we can also be grateful for people, and experiences. And we want to focus on both the personal and the interpersonal, because we want to think about how do we work with others? How do we work with ourselves? So today we're going to talk about reflections, and we're also going to be talking about using thanks notes and other means of communication to develop those relationships and that inclusivity. But the reflection piece to think about within ourselves, and how do we feel part of something, and how do we promote that within our students. We know from the science, from the research, that gratitude helps to contribute towards all of these things. Specifically today, we're going to think about that sense of belonging, school belonging in particular in the research. How do we strengthen relationships, build that self-esteem? And we'll be looking at both journaling and letter writing, or as we refer to it, reflections and thanks notes. And so we want to focus on how can we use that in our own practice. There was a study done using GiveThx, actually a peer-reviewed study, and we saw specifically for this webinar, I want to focus on the idea of friendship satisfaction, so that sense of belonging and where we are in a community. And so we saw a lot of promotion of that. Now, We're going to think today, and I'm going to share some practices with you. And all of these are free to you to use at any time. You can use them with our app or you can use them without our app. So I want to make sure that you know that all of this will be shared with you. And you can do it in any means that you feel comfortable. So we're going to look at each of those subcategories of the SEL competency of responsible decision-making with regard to inclusivity. And we're going to provide to you that practice. And then this is just a suggested routine that you could use. Of course, anything that works in your own practice, and we'll think about that later on, is what you can use. So with regard to identifying problems, we talked last week about the gratitude wave. And just as a reminder, that is when you select one person and everybody sends a thank you note to them. And in last week's, we talked about, how we could use that to include the community. So sending it to a staff member, but we could think about it with the students now. So you could think about either you select a student that you want them to feel recognized, or perhaps you ask the class, who's somebody we'd like to recognize today? And everybody sends a thanks note to that person in particular. You could pick it out on a popsicle stick or however you want to identify that student. That's one practice that we really enjoy and we see a lot of use of across the school. Grateful by subtraction. This is a reflection where we think about this one could be a great beginning of the week, a homeroom or advisory practice. This is one where we think about what are we grateful for and how do we recognize, what's missing in it. And so how do we kind of work within that practice? The strengths inventory is thinking about things. So in our app, we recognize a thanks note, but we also have you tag it to a competency, and that can be customized by the school. And so in this reflection, we ask students to think about, where are you being recognized? What are you being recognized for? And we think this would be great to prepare them for parent-teacher conferences. When we think about distance learning and we think about how hard it is to support social emotional learning right now, parent-teacher conferences are probably one of the harder things to do because we have to coordinate and really get everybody in the same room, but also to think about a practice that isn't so common right now. And so this is great for students to be able to think about, where am I successful? What am I being recognized for? And does that surprise me? Or does that resonate with who I am as a student? With messages given, we think about, so what have I given as a practice? What are the thanks notes I've given and what have I recognized others for? And this might be really good for a pre or post collaboration, especially as we're looking at distance learning. So before I'm going to do a group project or lab work or some assignment together, what are the messages that I'm, giving to others? What am I recognizing them for? And how can I use that toward my collaborative work? And I just want to pause here because it looks like we have a question in here, and we want to think about, how we're using those reflections toward our own practice. And so can we use it in preparation for a practice, or can we use it in completion of a practice? So as we go to work with others, then, what might we recognize in somebody that we didn't think about before? And ethical responsibility, we want to think about new gratitude. And new gratitude is picking somebody that maybe we haven't looked at in the past, somebody that we haven't recognized either as much or ever. And so we want to think about what is that. Maybe that would be a good opening for morning meeting or an after lunch refocus. Sometimes we have sustained silent reading or quiet time or a shout out time. And this might be a good time to recognize somebody new. And ethical responsibility for that is kind of thinking about, what is my decision making? How does that affect the others in my community? Now, want to recognize that we know it's really hard to create routines and practices that support this gratitude and inclusion, especially with distance learning. And so we're, providing, just before that, we gave you a few examples. All of these practices, again, will be provided to you. I'll give you the resources at the end of the webinar, and we'll also email them to you in a follow-up email. And you can use any of them. We've got over 30 practices for you. So we want to think about, what are some easy ways for you to facilitate gratitude? And that's why we built GiveThx. And GiveThx right now is free to anybody to use through the next school year, the 2021 school year. And we just want to recognize that we are trying to support social emotional learning through distance learning. And we want to make sure that you feel like you have one more tool in your toolbox that can help you with it. So if you choose to use it, GiveThx is a web app that offers everything in one place. And I'm going to show you what it looks like. All of those thanks notes we talked about, all of those reflections are in one place for the students to see it. And I'll show you what that inventory looks like, and also for the teachers to coach and monitor their students. We have found that GiveThx provides that community sense that we're missing with distance learning, that we can really literally take it into the student's home. So this is what an example of one practice looks like, the new gratitude, for example. And I saw we had another question about another practice, which I can share with you at the end of the webinar. So this is what a practice looks like. They're all one sheet. They're intended to be 4 to 10 minutes long. They each have their own Google Doc with them. And again, you don't need GiveThx to facilitate them. But of course, if you choose to use it, this is what it looks like in the system. Students can choose another student or staff member, anybody who's in the system, to send a thanks note to. And we can control who they see. We can control the student to student interaction if we want, by selecting who goes into which class. So you can make those classes literal classes, an English class, a science class, or you can make them grade level, division level, school-wide. You select who you want, and I want you to notice that you can see how many thanks notes you've given to somebody else. And so that will help you with that new gratitude. You can say, oh, I haven't given to them recently, or I haven't given to them at all. So you pick the student that you want to thank, or staff member. Then you write the thanks note, and you'll notice on the bottom there, we have competencies. Those you can customize for your school or community. So you can think about, what are the social emotional competencies we're focusing on? Do we want responsible decision-making in there, for example, or inclusivity? And so as you select those, each thanks note gets tagged to one of those competencies. And that's the inventory that a student would see. You can see the ones that you've received. You can also see a chart of the ones that you've given. So what have you recognized? What have you been recognized for? And what are you recognizing in others? And this can help the teachers to kind of see where the strengths are. Now, from the teacher view, they can see all of the thanks notes that are exchanged. And this is really lovely because it's just a student-to-student interaction. There's no audience out there beyond the one student and the teacher. So this allows us to monitor and coach the students to write appropriate and strong thanks notes, really teaching them that a gratitude can be for a thing or a person. And when it's for a person, there's usually an emotion involved, and really helping them to share that. They are, of course, you are able to remove them. If you see that exclamation mark, you are able to remove the thanks notes if needed. This is our heat map, which we find really helpful for teachers, especially when meeting with other teachers. This kind of just helps you to see who's giving, who's receiving, how many, are they sending in their reflections? Have you had to remove any thanks notes for kids? And so this is really nice to just kind of see where your class is at and to help you in your own monitoring of the students. Now, here's a quote from one of our students, and actually at the same school where our guest is from, but this is one for new gratitude. So again, following that line of the same practice. But this student, we really loved this particular quote because this is in talking about using GiveThx. They were really grateful that they're recognizing people they don't usually say thank you to. So this is exactly the piece of inclusivity that we are looking for. And then you can see on the bottom there, we've X'd out who it's from and to, but you can see there's an example of what it actually looks like. That's an actual thanks note that is in the system. And so that's what it would look like in there. And I just want to invite Donovan right now. Go ahead and unmute yourself. If you want to just share on using gratitude to develop that decision making in students.
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
So I was really excited about working with GiveThx because when I was working with the 7th graders last year, gratitude is super important to me, and it's a practice that I've been doing for myself for a long time. And I introduced it to my school, and my community got really into the whole gratitude thing. So when I found GiveThx, it was a way to kind of bridge the world of character strengths and things like gratitude with the educational world, which is something that I was kind of struggling to do. And during this time, I've been able to launch GiveThx with a number of students in my 8th grade. And I was kind of unsure on how they would be, because it's one thing to have kids in a class together and asking them to do a practice versus, having them do it online with kids that they haven't maybe seen in a couple of months. but they really took to it, and it's been something that has really, really brought the 8th graders together, as well as the adults on the 8th grade team. So when we think about responsible decision making, when we think about decision making in general, one of the things that I taught the students about gratitude is that when you use it when you are using it in a specific way. So I'm saying, I'm really grateful that you included me in the group today, right? If you teach students how to actually pick out specific things, they're going to be affirming and acknowledging those actions when they give gratitude to each other. So it's saying to this person, like, yes, this action that you did had a positive impact on me. And so at this age with middle schoolers, a lot of people like to think that they're really cynical and that they're really mean, but a lot of times they just don't know how to like be kind to each other. And they really latched onto this gratitude project. And the more that they would acknowledge the things that they were doing for each other, the more that those kids would start to do those things. So if someone said, like, I really appreciated you listening to me, right? Suddenly that student knows that listening to people is something that people appreciate about them. And so they're going out of their way to like listen more. Something else that's been really cool about, you know, their decision making is like being able to articulate what they're doing, or being able to articulate what someone else is doing for them. And that's something that like a lot of adults I know have kind of a difficult time struggling with, but the kids have been in the practice for so long that by the time we got on to GiveThx, they just completely took it over. I think the first week we had like, within the first couple of days, we had like 18 notes given, and I hadn't even like assigned anything yet because the kids had been in the practice of giving gratitude and it had become a part of our culture. So one of the things that I really like about the inclusion aspect of it is that as a teacher, I can go on and say, okay, you know, there's a couple students that haven't gotten any gratitude notes in a while, and then kind of send a message out to the class and say, hey, let's appreciate this student. And the impact it has on those students is, I mean, it's just wild. I had one of my 7th graders last year say to me that I was the first adult that had ever given him gratitude. And I asked him like what he meant. Like, you know, I was like, people say thank you. And he's like, yeah, but you're the first one who made me feel like I actually did something for you. And one of the things that I found with middle schoolers, especially with like the culture of the whole community, is that when the teachers are disconnected from the students, it's not a community. But having this app where it allows students to give thanks to teachers and teachers to give thanks to students and students to give thanks to each other, it's a way for everyone to see each other as people and not like student versus teacher. So it's been a blessing during this time. The students really miss each other, and they're actively making the decisions to go out of their way to say thank you to each other. And like I said in the beginning, I was very much leading it. And now the kids just do, like, whenever they're done with a project or done with a task, it's kind of like, okay, I need to go thank this person. And another thing about the decision making is it is teaching kids to recognize when other people are doing things for them. And so not just about like, oh, make sure you say thank you. But in the moment, kids are like, wow, this person is really being patient with me, or this person is being compassionate. And I love the tags in this app because last week I was like, hey, no one has said anything about patience. So let's talk about what does patience mean and what are some actions that show that someone's being patient with you. And as soon as we did that, all of a sudden we had this big burst of patience gratitude notes. And so
like recognizing where you could strengthen as a class.
Yes, absolutely.
And right now with distance learning, patience is so crucial.
Oh my gosh, it's really big. And it makes teachers like to have kids say, thank you for being patient with us and helping us grow is such a massive thing for a teacher to hear. And it's a humongous statement for a kid to make. And then kids making those statements towards each other. I mean, I get a little teary-eyed reading their gratitude notes, but that's what my experience has been so far. And I hope that
so much for sharing that. I mean, it's such a blessing to have you here during the school day. We really appreciate you taking a moment to be with us. And I do want to move along, but if you wouldn't mind staying for extra questions at the end, that would be fantastic. Thank you so much, Donovan.
No problem.
We know that decision-making routines for distance learning are crucial right now, as he's pointed out, and we just wanted to remind you of a couple of the ideas that we had, and I'd love for you to share in the chat others that you think kind of resonate for you, maybe in your practice, either as you close out the year, or maybe if you're doing summer school or even into next year. We would love to hear from you what you think might work, if it's going to be that sort of open close, the exit ticket idea. Is it going to be part of a process check, perhaps maybe with collaboration? It would be fantastic to hear from you. And again, you can just chat me directly if you want to, or you can chat to the group. And I noticed also in the chat that we had somebody asking for ideas from, you know, wisdom of the crowd, if you will. So please feel free to engage. I just had a quick check while he was chatting, and I wanted to make sure, you know, I'll stay on after for any added questions. But I love that you're eliciting from the group, because we can all learn from one another. And it looks like some of you, one of you says, I like the gratitude wave. So fantastic. I'm glad that that resonated with you. This would be great for new staff and new students, especially if we have the start of the year with distance learning. Fantastic. I love that idea. And any others, please continue to share with us. We would love to. I want to be mindful of your time, and I want to just share with you, these are the resources that we will email out to you. And there is the opportunity to look through all of our practices. You can contact me, Amy, at GiveThx.org if you have any questions at all, or if you want to do a demo of the app or pilot it for your school or maybe summer school program. We also have a link to the articles that we cite for the research, so if you want to learn more about that. And I would love for you to join us in a webinar 4, supporting staff well-being. That will be the final of this series, and we think it would be fantastic to have you with us to talk about how we can create community among one another. Thank you so much. There's a bit.ly here if you want to link directly to the deck right now, which will have all those links for you. Again, we will email it out to you. And we would just welcome you again. GiveThx is free for the entire 2021 school year. So you can go ahead and give it a go and see how it works with your community. Thank you again, and stay healthy and well, and we hope to see you back here soon.